Emily Thompson sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. Her phone had been ringing nonstop for the past 10 minutes, and each time she saw the hospital number flash across the screen, her chest tightened. She was already 20 minutes late for her court appearance over a simple traffic violation. The ticket had come at the worst possible time, the day after she returned from reporting in war-torn Syria. The courthouse parking lot was full, forcing her to circle 3 times before finding a space. As she rushed toward the building, her heels clicked frantically against the pavement. She checked her watch again. 25 minutes late now. Her leather messenger bag, filled with notes from her latest investigation, bumped against her hip. As she hurried, Emily pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. The bailiff gave her a stern look as she slipped into the back row. Judge Michael Bennett was already calling cases, his voice echoing off the walls. She tried to catch her breath and calm her racing heart. The courtroom was half empty, with only a handful of other people waiting for their cases to be heard. Traffic violation number 4827, Emily Thompson, the judge called in a monotone voice. Emily stood and walked quickly to the front of the courtroom. Judge Bennett was an older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. He looked tired, rubbing his temples as he reviewed her file. "Ms. Thompson, you're 26 minutes late to my courtroom," he said without looking up. "That's showing disrespect to this court." "I apologize, Your Honor. There was a family emergency and—" "That's what everyone says," he interrupted, still not meeting her eyes. "Driving through a red light at the intersection of Maple and Oak. The video clearly shows your vehicle proceeding through after the light had turned red." Emily opened her mouth to explain that her phone had been buzzing with emergency calls from the hospital about her grandmother, but Judge Bennett held up his hand. "The penalty for this offense is $250. How do you plead?" "Your Honor, I understand my mistake completely, but if I could just explain the circumstances—" "Guilty or not guilty, Ms. Thompson, I don't have time for long stories this morning." Emily felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Just yesterday she had been dodging gunfire in Syria to report on civilians trapped in the conflict. Today she couldn't even get this judge to listen for 2 minutes. "Guilty," she said quietly. "Fine is $250. Pay at the clerk's desk. Next case." Judge Bennett waved her away dismissively and called the next case. Emily stood there for a moment, disbelieving. She had interviewed war criminals who had shown more consideration than this judge. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed again. It was the hospital. She quickly answered as she walked toward the payment window. "Hello, how is she?" "Ms. Thompson, your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors think you should come immediately." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Emily promised, ending the call. She quickly paid her fine to the clerk, a kind-looking woman in her 50s who gave her a sympathetic smile. "Court's rough today, isn't it?" the clerk asked softly. "Just having the worst day," Emily whispered back. As she left the courthouse, Emily thought about all the injustices she had witnessed in her years as a foreign correspondent. Somehow, this small personal injustice stung just as much. The judge hadn't even looked at her properly. He hadn't seen the exhaustion in her face, the worry in her eyes, or recognized that sometimes people have real emergencies that matter more than traffic laws. She drove to the hospital, this time obeying every traffic rule perfectly. Her phone rang again as she parked, but this time it was her editor from the international news desk. "Emily, the photos from your Syrian investigation are incredible. You risked everything for this story. The government is already responding to your report about the human trafficking ring. You've saved lives." Emily leaned against her car, letting tears finally fall. "Thank you, James. I just wish people at home could see that sometimes there's more to a story than what appears on the surface." "What do you mean?" "Nothing, just a rough morning. I'll call you later. I need to see my grandmother." As she walked into the hospital, Emily thought about how people make judgments every day without knowing the full story. Today, she had been on the receiving end of that judgment. Tomorrow, she would return to reporting stories that showed the complexity of human struggles. But for now, all that mattered was reaching her grandmother's bedside in time. The end judge. Michael Bennett sat at his desk during lunch break, unwrapping his sandwich. The morning had been busy with traffic cases, and he was glad for the quiet. His secretary knocked on his door with the afternoon newspaper. "Thought you might want to see this," she said, placing it on his desk. "Front page news about that local reporter." Bennett nodded his thanks and opened the paper as he ate. His sandwich stopped halfway to his mouth when he saw the photograph. There, on the front page, was Emily Thompson, the woman he had fined just 3 hours ago. The headline read, "Local Journalist Wins International Award for War Reporting." He read the article carefully, his heart sinking with each sentence. Emily Thompson had spent 5 years reporting from the world's most dangerous places. She had uncovered human trafficking operations in Syria. She had exposed war crimes in Sudan. 3 weeks ago, she had narrowly escaped a bomb blast while interviewing refugees. The article mentioned her grandmother, Margaret Thompson, age 78, who had raised Emily after her parents died in a car accident when she was young. Thompson rushed home from Syria when she received news of her grandmother's heart attack, the article stated. Despite her own exhaustion from years of dangerous work, her first thought was family. Bennett put down his sandwich, no longer hungry. He remembered how Emily had tried to explain something about an emergency. He had cut her off, assumed she was making excuses like everyone else. The article included quotes from other journalists, praising Emily's courage and dedication to truth. He picked up his phone and called his secretary. "Sarah, do you have Emily Thompson's phone number? She was in court this morning." "The traffic violation case?" "Yes, I have it here." "Thank you." "Also, do you know which hospital her grandmother is at?" "I believe it's St. Mary's. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." Bennett hung up and stared at the newspaper photo. In it, Emily wore a protective vest and held a microphone, smoke rising behind her from a burning building. Her eyes showed determination and compassion. This was not the same tired, worried woman who had stood before his bench this morning. Or was it? He thought about all the times he had dismissed people's explanations. How many had been telling the truth? How many had needed his understanding instead of his judgment? His stomach twisted with guilt. That afternoon, Bennett could barely concentrate on his cases. He kept thinking about Emily Thompson at the hospital with her grandmother. Had the old woman survived? Was Emily sitting beside her bed, worried about losing the person who raised her? After work, Bennett drove to St. Mary's Hospital. He didn't know what he would say, but he needed to see Emily again. At the information desk, he asked about Margaret Thompson. "She's in room 412, but visiting hours are limited to family," the nurse said. "I'm a friend," Bennett lied. "Could you at least tell me how she's doing?" "She had a heart attack yesterday. She's stable now, but it's still critical." Bennett thanked her and sat in the waiting room. He watched families come and go, some crying with relief, others with grief. After an hour, he saw Emily walking toward the elevator carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She stopped when she saw him. "Judge Bennett? What are you doing here?" I read the newspaper article about you and your work, and your grandmother." Emily studied his face carefully. "And? I owe you an apology. I should have listened this morning. I should have given you a chance to explain." "You're right. You should have." Her voice was tired but not angry. "How is she?" "Your grandmother?" "She's alive. Doctors say she might need surgery." Emily sipped her coffee. "Sometimes I report on disasters around the world, and I think that's the real tragedy. Then something happens close to home, and you realize all pain is real no matter where it happens." Bennett nodded. "I make hundreds of judgments every week. I didn't realize how easy it is to get them wrong." "The difference is," Emily said softly, "most people you judge can't write articles that appear on the front page. But they all have stories too, important ones." She walked to the elevator, then turned back. "Thank you for coming here. It means something." As the elevator doors closed, Bennett sat back down. He thought about tomorrow's court session, about all the people who would stand before him with their own emergency stories. For the first time in years, he wondered how many truths he had dismissed as excuses. The end. The next morning, Judge Bennett arrived at his courthouse an hour early. He sat at his desk staring at a blank piece of paper. He wanted to change something, but he wasn't sure how to start. The newspaper with Emily's story still lay on his desk, folded to show her photograph. His secretary arrived and found him deep in thought. "Judge Bennett, you have 17 cases today. Traffic violations start at 9. Sarah, do you think I'm fair to people who come before me?" She looked surprised at the question. "You follow the law, sir." "That's not what I asked." Sarah hesitated, then sat down across from him. "Sometimes, you don't let people finish their stories, like yesterday with the reporter." Bennett nodded slowly. "What if I made a different rule? What if I let everyone explain first? It would take longer, but it might be better justice." At 9 o'clock, the first case was called. Thomas Wright, age 43, entered the courtroom. He was a delivery driver accused of speeding in a school zone. "Mr. Wright," Bennett began, "before we proceed, I want you to tell me what happened that day. Take your time." Thomas looked confused, but began speaking. "I was making my last delivery. My wife was having our baby and the hospital called. I was trying to finish work so I could go to her. I know I was speeding and I'm sorry, I just wanted to be there for our first child." Bennett listened carefully. "When was your child born?" 3 days ago. A healthy girl named Hope." "Congratulations." Bennett made some notes. "The usual fine for school zone speeding is $500. Given your circumstances, I'm reducing it to $100 and no points on your license. But you must promise to always follow speed limits near schools." Thomas looked stunned. "Thank you, Your Honor." The next case was Margaret Chen, an elderly woman caught running a red light. When Bennett asked for her story, she explained that her eyesight was failing. She was too proud to tell her children she needed help. "Mrs. Chen, have you considered that driving with poor eyesight could hurt others?" She lowered her head. "I know. I don't want to be a burden." Bennett thought of his own aging parents. "Would you consider a vision test? If you can't pass, I'll work with you to find safe transportation options. No points or fine if you agree." She agreed gratefully. Case after case brought new stories. A teenager late for college entrance exams. A man rushing to his father's hospital. A woman avoiding an abusive ex-husband. Bennett listened to each one, really listened. Some stories were just excuses, but many were genuine emergencies. The court clerk noticed the change. "Judge, we're running very late today." "Better late with justice than quick with judgment," Bennett replied. By lunch, word had spread through the courthouse. People waiting for their cases whispered about the changed judge. Some were hopeful, others suspicious. That afternoon, Bennett received a note from Emily Thompson. It simply said, "I noticed your new approach made the news. Change starts with one person listening." The text message surprised him. How did she know about his morning session? Then he remembered she was a journalist. Of course she would hear about changes in the courthouse. His afternoon proceeded similarly. He moved slowly through cases, asking questions, considering circumstances. By the end of the day, he had completed only half his usual number of cases, but he felt more satisfied than he had in years. His fellow judges noticed too. Judge Patricia Walsh stopped by his chambers. "Michael, what's going on? You're letting everyone tell their life stories." "I'm letting them explain their circumstances before I judge them. That's not efficient. But it might be human." Patricia shook her head but smiled. "The Emily Thompson case really affected you, didn't it?" "It opened my eyes to what I've been missing." As Bennett left the courthouse that evening, he passed by a homeless man he saw every day. For the first time, he stopped. "What's your name?" he asked. The man looked up, surprised. "Robert, sir." "How did you end up here, Robert?" "Lost my job. Lost my family. Lost my way." Bennett reached into his wallet and handed him some money. More importantly, He sat down beside him on the bench. "Tell me your story, Robert." They talked for 20 minutes. Bennett learned that Robert had once been a teacher. He heard about the series of events that led to homelessness. When he finally stood to leave, Robert said, "Most people hurry past. Thank you for stopping." Walking to his car, Bennett realized that every person carried stories worth hearing. His job wasn't just to judge the facts, but to understand the people behind them. The end, 2 weeks passed, and Judge Bennett's new approach spread through the courthouse. The first change was small but noticeable. The courtroom felt different. People entered with less fear. They left with relief even when fined. His secretary noticed the change too. "People are calling you the listening judge now," she mentioned during morning coffee. Bennett smiled but felt shy about the nickname. He was just doing what felt right. Each day brought new stories that reminded him why he chose law: to serve justice, not just punish mistakes. One Tuesday morning, a young woman named Rachel stood before him. She had driven without insurance because she couldn't afford both insurance and her mother's diabetes medicine. Bennett listened to her struggle, working 2 jobs, caring for her sick mother alone, trying to save money for nursing school. "Driving without insurance is serious," Bennett told her. "But I understand your situation. I'll suspend your fine if you get insurance within 2 weeks and show proof to this court." Rachel thanked him with tears in her eyes. 2 weeks later, she returned with insurance papers and a letter explaining how his kindness gave her hope to keep trying. Bennett started thinking bigger. He proposed changes to the courthouse system. What if every judge spent 5 extra minutes listening? What if they connected traffic violators with social services when needed? The head judge, Robert Johnson, invited him to speak at a judges' meeting. "Michael, explain this new method of yours," Judge Johnson said. Bennett stood before his colleagues. "I simply ask people to explain their circumstances before I decide their penalty. Sometimes the law needs context to serve justice properly." Some judges nodded. Others looked skeptical. Judge Peters raised her hand. "This slows down the system. We process hundreds of cases weekly." "Yes, but do we process them fairly? A speeding ticket might mean someone loses their job if they're already struggling. A fine might force a parent to choose between medicine and food for their children." After Bennett spoke, 3 other judges tried his approach. 2 found it valuable. One returned to the old way, claiming efficiency mattered more than stories. Bennett also started something new. He placed a suggestion box in the courtroom. "Share how the court system could serve you better." Anonymous notes began appearing. One read, "Thank you for not treating me like a number." Another, "I wish all judges listened like you do." One afternoon, Bennett received an unexpected visitor. A local journalist wanted to write about his new approach. The article appeared 3 days later with the headline, "The Judge Who Listens." Emily Thompson called that evening. "I read the article. You're doing what I do, just in a different way." "What do you mean?" "Giving people voice, letting their stories matter. That's what journalism is about." "I never thought of it that way." "We both search for truth. You in the courtroom, me in war zones. Different places, same mission." Their conversation planted an idea in Bennett's mind. He invited Emily to speak to his fellow judges about the importance of listening. She agreed immediately. On the day of her presentation, Emily entered the judge's conference room carrying her laptop. She still looked tired from her recent trip to Tanzania, but her voice was strong. "When I report from conflict zones, I listen. I hear stories that never make the news because they're too painful, too complex, or too true. Every person has layers." She showed them photos from her work. A soldier who cried about missing his children, a refugee who had been a doctor, a war criminal who had saved 20 people's lives. Justice needs the whole story. In my work, missing context can mean missing the truth entirely. The same applies here. The judges asked questions. Emily answered each one thoughtfully. Judge Walsh, who had criticized Bennett's slowdown, asked about efficiency. "Speed without accuracy is just speed." Emily replied, "Your decisions change lives." Shouldn't they be informed decisions? After Emily left, Bennett's colleagues discussed her words. Judge Walsh approached him privately. "I'll try listening more carefully tomorrow." That night, Bennett couldn't sleep. He thought about how one traffic ticket had changed his entire perspective. Emily's challenge had sparked something. Now he was the catalyst for others. The next morning, he found a note on his desk from Robert, the homeless man. "Dear Judge Bennett, I got a job at the library thanks to your help. Sometimes one conversation changes everything. Thank you for stopping to listen." Bennett put the note in his drawer with Emily's thank you note. They reminded him daily. Behind every case was a human story. Some stories were simple, some were complex, but all were worth hearing. The courthouse started feeling like a place of understanding rather than judgment. People entered with their heads up instead of down. Justice still served its purpose, but now it served with wisdom. Bennett realized that Emily had given him more than an apology. She had given him a new way to view his work, as a chance to listen, understand, and help guide people toward better choices. The courtroom had become a place where stories weren't just told, they were heard. The end 6 months after that first encounter, the courthouse had transformed completely. Judge Bennett's listening approach had spread throughout the building. Even Judge Peters, the biggest skeptic, now allowed people to explain their circumstances. The courthouse cafeteria buzzed with conversations about the remarkable changes happening. Emily Thompson stopped by the courthouse one autumn morning. She had just returned from reporting in Afghanistan and wanted to check on Margaret, her grandmother, who had made a full recovery and often visited to watch the new courthouse in action. "My grandmother tells me you've quite a reputation now," Emily said to Bennett during a coffee break. "I learned from a good teacher," he replied, smiling. Margaret Thompson joined them, walking steadily with her cane. "You know, young man, Emily taught you what she learned from war zones. Everyone has a story that matters." That afternoon, the local mayor visited the courthouse. She had heard about Bennett's reforms and wanted to see them in action. She sat quietly in the back of the courtroom. A case came up about James Miller, a farmer who had driven an unregistered vehicle to market because his truck had broken down. When Bennett asked for his story, James explained how the crop season had been terrible. He was trying to save his farm from foreclosure. "I can connect you with agricultural assistance programs," Bennett said. "There are resources to help farmers in difficult times. The fine will be waived if you register your vehicle within 30 days and attend a financial planning workshop the county offers." James left the courtroom with hope instead of debt. The mayor noted everything in her small book. Later that week, the mayor invited Bennett to a town hall meeting. "Your approach could transform how our entire community handles justice," she explained. At the meeting, Bennett stood nervously before 50 citizens. He explained his simple philosophy. "Listen first, judge second, understand before deciding." Thomas Wright, the delivery driver from months ago, stood up from the audience. "This judge changed my life. Instead of points on my license that could have cost me my job, he understood my situation. Now I can support my family and our baby daughter." Rachel, the nursing student, also spoke. "Judge Bennett didn't just waive my fine. He helped me see that asking for help isn't weakness. I start nursing school next month." After the meeting, the mayor proposed a new program, the Bennett Initiative, training all local officials in listening techniques. Bennett felt embarrassed by the name but agreed to help create the training manual. Emily and Bennett collaborated on the manual, combining her journalism techniques with his judicial experience. They wrote, "Every person carries wisdom. Every situation has context. Justice isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding why rules were broken." During this time, Bennett noticed Emily seemed different. She was quieter, more thoughtful. One day at lunch, she confessed, "I'm thinking of leaving war reporting. After watching the changes here, I wonder if I could make a difference from home." "You already have made a difference," Bennett said. "Look at this courthouse, this community. It started with you challenging one judge to listen better." 3 months later, Emily accepted a position teaching journalism at the local university. Her first class focused on the power of listening. Bennett was her first guest speaker. "This judge taught me that change doesn't need grand gestures," Emily told her students. "It needs one person willing to stop, listen, and act differently." The viewer Bennett initiative expanded to neighboring towns. Judges, police officers, and social workers learned to pause before judging. Crime rates didn't drop immediately, but community trust increased. On a sunny spring morning exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Emily and Bennett met for coffee. Margaret joined them, bringing homemade cookies. "Remember when I was just another name on your court docket?" Emily teased. "How could I forget? You changed everything." "No," Margaret interrupted gently. "You both changed everything. Emily by challenging, Michael by accepting the challenge, and the community by embracing change." Bennett looked around the coffee shop. He saw people he had once judged now living better lives. Robert the homeless man worked nearby as a library assistant. Rachel had graduated nursing school. James had saved his farm. Emily placed her hand on Bennett's arm. "You know what I love most? You didn't just change how you judge cases. You changed how you see people. That's what you do in war zones, isn't it? See the humanity even in difficult places?" "Exactly. And sometimes the most difficult places to find humanity are right at home, in everyday moments." As they finished their coffee, Bennett received a text from his court clerk. "Judge Walsh just spent 20 minutes listening to a teenager's family situation. The change is spreading." Emily smiled. One conversation at a time, one story at a time. Later that afternoon, Bennett returned to his courtroom. Above his bench hung a new sign he had commissioned. "Here we listen first." It wasn't just a slogan anymore. It had become a way of life. The end.